Okay, welcome back. Now let's create the testimonial section. Now, as you can see, the testimonial has about three parts to it. The upper part, which is the text, the headings and the text, and we already created that in the previous lesson. Now, next we have the card that contains the customer image and the customer name and the text. And finally, the two buttons. Of course, these two buttons are not part of the reusable button we created earlier. Right? So now let's get started creating them. Now, so here in our index.html, I have the content copied to the clipboard already. All right, so let me Ctrl V to paste them. We have the FL call to it because if you look at that finished version, you see that the three components to that section are arranged one on top of the other. This is the section header, this is the card, and these are the two buttons. Now, so this is the specific selector to the section, testimonial. And inside the testimonial, I have the section header. I have the testimonial list. And inside the testimonial list, I have the two buttons, the left arrow and the right arrow. Let's get into our home.scss to start them. So here in the home.scss, I'll target the testimonial and I'll give it a width of 50%. If you observe that section, I didn't apply the row PD to it. It's because its width is going to be smaller than the previous sections. And by that means margin will be auto. And this time I'll have to apply a padding to it of 10 rem, top and bottom, and 0 left and right. What else? Okay, so now I can get into the testimonial to target the list. Now in the list, all I need to do is set justification to center. Of course, you know, it already has the display set to flex through the utility FL call. And align item center. That means I want those content to be both vertically and horizontally centered. I want to give it a padding bottom of 3 rem. And if you look at the way the buttons are positioned, it is obvious that we have to use absolute positioning to get them in those places. So it means that I will have to set the position of the list to have a relative position. And so that's it about the list. Now, but if you note that it's in the list, that we have the two buttons. So I could right away nest them inside it. Now, if you look at the two buttons, they have common attributes to them in that they both have the same background color and their size and height, the width and height are the same. So for all of those common characteristics, I can put them together by doing something like this: right arrow, left arrow, and apply the common properties. So I want their display to be flex. And the reason is because so that I can target the positioning of the arrow inside of them. And justify content to center, align item to center also. And let me give them a width of 5 rem and a height of 5 rem as well. And if you notice the fact that they are circle, obviously that means border radius. We've used this a couple of times now. 50%. And again, you see our browser preferences kicked in. Now the background color is the color primary. Because they are button, let me set their cursor to pointer. Font size 2 rem. And now let's see what we have so far before we proceed. If I go to the start and refresh, yeah, there we are. Right, we already have the buttons, but of course we can't see the text inside, and we can't see our image. Of course, we've not touched that. All right, so let's continue. Next, I have to say position absolute. And if I want position absolute, both of them have to be on the same horizontal position. And to have them in that horizontal position, I can target from the top or from the bottom. Don't forget that we set this parent, the list, to relative. So I can target it from the top or from the bottom. So if I say top now, and I have 100%, I'm saying that I should go to the very end of the parent. That's the testimonial list. So let's see what we have with this. Good. If I refresh, you see it goes to the very bottom. But now both of them stack on top of each other, so you can't see the second one. All right, so these are the common attributes to the two buttons. Then we can now target them individually. So to target them individually, I will get out of the selector for both of them and target each one. So let me target the right and say right. Let's say 40% for a start. Don't forget, we already give them a common absolute position here. So individually now, I want the right to be 40% from the right. And for the left, I want it also to be 40% from the left. If I save that and watch now, good. You see that we have them 40% from the left and right respectively. Okay, but we're not done yet. Let's continue. Again, the text has to be white inside, so that's a common attribute to them. So I can say color here, white. Good. So we have the color white. But if you observe that even our section heading is not displaying, and you probably can guess why it is so at the time we created this utility. Now let's have a look at it. And that is section header. Here it is. Remember that when we created it, we had the color to be color white because we were using it on a background color of blue. So this time around, I will have to overwrite that background color. And so I can come here and say section header. And if you look at it, that we use color primary in that place. That is in the finished version, we use color primary. So I'm going to set it to color primary here also. Color primary. Okay. I give that a save. Good. So we have the text now back. All right. So we're left with this image and the customer name. So again, let's go back to that card now. So outside of the left arrow, don't forget that this button, let's see where it starts from. That's in the list. So the card, look at the HTML, the card. What is the card? This is the card. It's inside the list. But again, if you understand the fact that it is technically not a child, right? That's in terms of the block element modifier, is technically not a child. I may not want to nest it inside it. I've said this a couple of times now. But like I said it before also, I can nest it, but it won't make the readability that good. So I would rather let it stay on its own. So I will come outside, and one way I can make sure that I'm at the right place is to close this. So I can come outside now and say card. And inside the card, I want the padding to be 2rem. Height is auto. And I use auto because each customer may have different length of text associated with it, so I can afford to specify any height there. And the width 80%. And if you look at the finished version, you see it has a tiny border shadow there, and we use our border shadow saved. Then inside the card, if you look at that, you see we have the customer there, so I can nest this customer inside the card. It makes sense to do so. So dot customer, and what do we have for the customer? Display flex. And don't forget that that customer contains the customer image and his name. So I want them side by side. That's why we are setting display to flex. And I want the align item to be center. That is, I want them center vertically, because flex direction now is row. And again, inside the customer, I have image there. So again, I can get to that image by saying img and set the width to 6 rem, height also to 6 rem. Don't forget that image is circle, and you know what needs to do with that. That's border radius to be 50%. We've used it a couple of times now. Good. So, and again, looking at the finished version, let's see that. You see that the image has this primary color and as the border color, and the customer name is also in that same orange color. That's the color secondary there. So let's get these ones applied. So I just need to say border, and that border, it's a bit thick, so let's say 5 pixel solid and color secondary. Let's give this a save and see what we have so far. Good. We're getting close. So now we are left with this customer name, which must also have the same color secondary and giving it a gap so it doesn't touch the image. Where do we do that? Now let's look at the HTML and see where the customer name or the selector targeting the customer name, and that is heading sub. And let's check, heading sub is H4 there, and it's one of the classes that is already pre-styled. All right, and that should be in our, where should that be? Heading sub, that should be in the base. Let's check what we set for it. Okay, heading sub, it has a font size of 1.2 rem, but if you look at the finished version, that font size is bigger than 1.2 rem. So that means I will have to override that heading sub. Heading sub, I want to give it a color of color primary or secondary, I beg your pardon, color secondary, and margin left of 1 rem, and give it a font size of say 2 rem, like so. So give that a save, refresh. Good. So this now matches what we have in the finished version. This is the finished version. So you see they are exactly alike now. All right. So this is the customer testimonial section completed. In the next class, we'll look at the next section.